Good morning, my friends. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can be with you forever. I'm going to be leaving my email in the description, so if you want to contact me for whatever reason at all, feel free to do so. So today, I'm going to be talking about a subject that is sort of been on my mind a lot lately, and I think it's been kind of the general sentiment of, in people's foray of thought, so to speak. And that's, the concept of education and how much education actually benefits people in terms of like a systematic construct of education. But I don't even want to talk about it from a systemic point of view. Just the process of education, the process of gathering information, and how people nowadays sort of attribute idiocy to ignorance, or lack of education, so to speak, to ignorance or idiocy, when really it's actually, you notice that a lot of like the issues and problems that exist in the world are not from a lack of education, but rather from actual education in and of itself, right? A lot of people become enthralled with ideologies and toxic belief systems, so to speak, because of education and because of learning and because of gathering information. And I think that's something that should be more emphasized when talking about ignorance, especially in this age of disinformation that everyone sort of obsesses about. And that and the reality is that a lot of people are ignorant because of the education they choose to give themselves. And this could come from, whether it's in public schools or if they go to college, or whether they just buy a bunch of books online. They don't really understand what they're reading. And I've been guilty of it as well. Because I dropped out of college when I was younger to pursue music, and, it kind of derailed me on my career for a bit, but I wanted to do something on my own. And part of that was educating myself in various subjects. I wanted to get into finance for a while and was trying to get a job at a bank. Anyway, it's irrelevant. But the point is that this process of education and educating myself revolved around a lot of buying books. And I realized that when you get into this cycle of buying books, you really start to realize that a lot of the information you're going to go and search for are usually biased towards you, right? Because there's so much information, especially with books, and books don't, it takes not a lot of effort really, I would say, but it takes effort to read a book. It takes some time, depending on how fast of a reader you are. Some people, it can take them a day to read a book. Some people, it can take them a month. It's really different for everyone. But the point is that if you're going to invest your time into a book, you're most likely going to find something that you connect with or resonate with or relate with to some degree. And a lot of books out there are marketed based off of that basic human function of wanting to learn things from a perspective that you align with, right? And this is where you get a lot of politicized writings from whatever category of political ideology you fall under. You are subject to this sort of marketing propaganda of people within different ideologies sort of trying to market their book towards someone like you specifically. So, there's people who market books for, single white men. Look at Jordan Peterson. It's like the same kind of construct. Or you think of people who market things for like queer people or like black people or all kinds of, specific genres of people, I guess, if you want to call them, all these different categories that we've culturally divided ourselves into. And you can see it because this process of educating yourself and buying these books or taking classes in college, don't forget college is subject to this as well. Because colleges have been growing so much, and because so many people go to college now, everything has been so segregated by department. Like now you just have an entire building dedicated to some specific field. and everyone within that building is only interested in whatever that subject is, and they're completely ignorant towards anything else going on around them. So, whether you're taking art classes, you're taking business classes, you're subject to the biases of that specific department. And even more so if you're educating yourself, the algorithm is disrupting that as well and making it appear that your biases basically are confirmed because of the information that you are most likely triggered to consume because of your own preconceived understandings of the world. And usually it's from their own perspective. And this creates ignorance because there is no process of actual critical thinking. And that's the real thing that's actually important. Forget about education and knowledge, right? The actual process of critical thinking, the process of trying to fully understand something that's being presented to you, to constantly question something, and to also, still hold on to your own views, but to also understand the other point of view from an impartial standpoint, a non-emotional standpoint, is the real cause basically of ignorance. Because ignorance is really, you can be as educated as possible, you can know everything in the world, and you can still be ignorant just based off of your own biases and emotional connections to things that you'll gravitate towards. You think about just look at like world leaders, people who run dictatorships. These were all very educated people. Most they're just, they were just highly educated, very intelligent, knew exactly what they were talking about, knew how to pinpoint their arguments, and they knew the other side well enough to be able to dismantle any argument that opposed them, right? And this is the process of education that it has. It's mental conditioning in a way. It's strengthening yourself, but it doesn't save you from ignorance necessarily. It only makes you stronger in terms of defending and rationalizing your beliefs. And what your beliefs are is usually pretty subconsciously layered. It's pretty rooted deep. And if you don't have that actual awareness of your own self and awareness of the world, then you won't be able to actually escape ignorance, no matter how educated you become. And that's why a lot of educated people are usually pretty ignorant when it comes to actually realizing their ideas or realizing their conceptions of the world, because they're caught up in their own rationalized mind that they can't actually bridge the gap between their own mind and the real world. And that's where this process of like what you call wisdom or understanding or mindfulness, if you want to go in that route, is mostly the more important thing. I also think curiosity as a concept is what really drives a person to actually become educated in a real context, or not ignorant. Because if you're not curious, or if you don't question information that is given to you, and you just sort of roll with it, you won't actually learn anything from that information, nor will you actually apply it in a beneficial way. You're just sort of memorizing it. And that's why you can kind of see, like, especially in a lot of careers, where you have people go to medical school, for instance, for 7 years, but they really only become proficient in their practice once they actually start practicing the practice, basically, like getting involved into it, and then they actually develop experience, like real life experience, in order to fully understand their career. And the education at that point actually becomes useful, whereas before it was just just on the surface of your mind, basically, that's completely not integrated. And I think like a good example of this is, you look at a bodybuilder. Most bodybuilders are actually in terrible shape. They have a lot of strength, obviously. They have a lot of muscle. They have a lot of girth. But when you actually see them apply themselves in real physically exerting tasks, like, playing actual sports, or just even having sex, climbing up a flight of stairs, or, any kind of functional strength that you would need in the real world, they kind of fail drastically at that, because all they know is how to target those muscles and make them bigger, but they don't actually have any kind of mental integration into their body. They don't have the wisdom. They don't have the ability to utilize that strength. And so in a way, they are kind of bodily ignorant, right? They're educated. Their bodies are like educated, but they don't actually have the real curiosity, I guess, of their own body to be able to integrate that into a real life context. And I think education in many ways is the same. And that's kind of what education teaches kids. It's less to do with trying to figure something out and more to do with cramming as much information as you can in your mind. And then that's supposed to mean that you're educated, even though you have no ability to utilize that. And like I said, like this education is just, strength training, basically. It is developing and conditioning your mind to process more information, to see, to just have more knowledge, basically. But the problem comes from when the actual person fails to question or look deeper into the context of these things and just takes it at surface value and just, memorizes information, but never actually integrates themselves into it. You know what I mean? They don't integrate their mind into the reality of what this idea is being presented as. They don't want to question it. They don't challenge it. They're not curious. They don't want to learn more about it. They're just like, this is the information that's being presented to me. You memorize it. You write a thesis or a paper basically repeating what you already know from what you've learned because you just memorized it, and then you write it in your own words, which is just rehashing it. Basically, you're not really fully integrating it, and then you get a grade on it based off of how well you understood the text in the context of you basically memorized what the teacher presented the information to you as, and that's basically it, right? Because don't forget, like, when you're understanding or learning specific ideas in school, you're going to have a teacher that has his or her own interpretation of what it is, and that's what you learn as fact, and that's what you put into in terms of, like, if you're taking a test or you're writing a paper, you have to put that information that the teacher gives you, otherwise you are incorrect, because it's really based around off of correct or incorrect. The knowledge that you have, is it this specific thing? And if it's not that specific thing, then you are wrong. But it doesn't actually teach you to understand how this relates to you on a real level, or how to integrate this into your own life. I'm talking very generally because this applies to like so many different fields of study. And I think that's the real problem that we get, especially when it comes to ideological ideas, because those are very made up. It's not as tactile, it's not as functional as something like, you're learning carpentry. You pretty much know that, like, in carpentry, if you don't have the safety procedures met when you're cutting wood, you might lose a finger. Like, those are just things that are just physically tangible that you just have to know in order to move forward. But then you get into ideological things, and then you're discussing ideas and concepts that are pretty much based off of only a subjective interpretation or a subjective understanding of seeing the world through their own perspective. And so at that point, you have to have actual wisdom in order to understand everything that's going on. Because if you're just going and learning about an ideological idea, and this also includes science, by the way, because a lot of science is ideological in nature, and what people believe to be the root cause of certain phenomenon that exists in the world is basically a consensus from the scientific community, and in a lot of ways can become ideological, even though, sure, there is more of a hard science versus like a soft science, I guess what you would call it. But at the end of the day, a lot of these things are ideological, or just beliefs, or just, things that under the consensus of the scientific community or the medical community, they sort of just agree unanimously on, even though it might not necessarily be the truth. And this has happened historically, where a lot of things that were under a consensus amongst scientists were disproven because someone came along and challenged that idea. They didn't just follow it verbatim, like what we are learning nowadays in most schools, to just learn something verbatim from what your teacher learns, and that's what the world is to you now. Like, there's no integration, there's no curiosity of trying to push the information forward. And I think that's where the real education or knowledge aspect comes from, because it's a process of continually moving forward, right? That's the in terms of human history, it's always been a story of new ideas being generated and then them being challenged and them being pushed forward into a new dimension of thought and a new dimension of belief. And we're not really seeing that much anymore. We're kind of continually rehashing these same concepts because no one's actually integrating themselves on a spiritual level into the knowledge that they're trying to acquire. They're only just memorizing facts, or not even necessarily facts, just opinions, and then repeating those opinions. And then they claim that they're educated. That's not education. You're not learning anything. You're not in the process of learning. You're not in the process of curiosity. And I notice a lot of people do not put effort into learning more about things, especially even if they're in college. They'll only read what is required for the assignment, but they won't go in any deeper. Like, they think it's weird to actually be interested in what they're learning about and, like, on their own time learn more about the subject they're learning about. That's weird to them because they just have to learn the information whenever is given to them, do the assignment, then they get to the degree, and then they get their job that has absolutely nothing to do with whatever they pretended to learn about. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Those are my thoughts on education. I think that to truly be knowledgeable, or to be worthwhile as a human being in terms of utilizing your knowledge, you have to integrate yourself into the learning process, integrate your own curiosity to drive that even further, because it's like, what's the point otherwise? Like, why are you even learning this information if you're not even wanting to be a part of it in some place? You're just memorizing shit, so you're just a robot at this point. And if people are afraid of AI taking over the world, if you want to win, the only way to do that is to do what a computer doesn't do, which is integrate yourself into something. You're not just memorizing facts and information and going off of whatever's told to you, whatever's presented to you. You actually question things. That's part of actually what separates a human from a computer, is that the human can challenge and go their own way or break free from whatever is programmed into you, and you can change up things. You can be creative in that way and escape from preconceived knowledge that's given to you. That's how all the greatest scientists and the greatest discoverers and inventors of all time, they've all been doing that. All the Sigma males or whatever the fuck, they all integrated their curiosity into their own life, into their own education, and they went beyond what was presented to them because they didn't just follow facts and opinions and just like a barrage of information and just memorized it. No, they actually moved themselves into it. It's kind of hard to describe, I guess, because it's kind of something that's very vague and subjective in terms of how you actually learn something in a real way. But all it really takes is critical thinking and like just a drive to learn more. Because if you don't have that, and I mean that in a way where you're genuinely wanting to learn about the information, not a drive to, I'm going to finish my assignment and get the best grade possible so that way I can get the degree and job I want. That's not the mindset. The mindset is, I want to learn more about this information. I want to understand it more. I want to integrate it more. I want to see the other side of this. Maybe this is wrong. Maybe this isn't as true as they perceive it to be. I don't know. Just like things like that, which not a lot of people want to do because, there's also that political factor to things. People are afraid to speak up and challenge ideas because then that means that they're a bad person sometimes. And that's also wrong. You shouldn't feel like a bad person for challenging something, but you should challenge something with a place of respect, not a place of trying to destroy something because you're so knowledgeable about everything that you can destroy and any kind of argument presented to you. You approach the argument with genuine curiosity and genuine questioning, and you figure out if it's right or wrong from that standpoint, not from a standpoint of trying to bring the other person's argument down, but rather from more understanding it. And then once you understand it, then you can actually assess whether you believe it's right or wrong at that point, because you've actually put the effort into accepting it as not as fact, but as a reality that exists. Anyway, I'm leaving it at that. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.